All right, next up we have Greg Dean. Greg comes to us from Westminster, Colorado, where he works as a geologist for the Adams County government as oil and gas administrator. He has been interested in flags since the 1996 Olympics in Atlanta. The paper he will present today is another quantitative analytics and offering new methodologies for vexillology. Say that 3 times fast.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for sticking around for the afternoon. My name is Greg Dean. I'm here to present my paper on the statistics in vexillology, a quantitative look at stars on flags. The goals of my paper were to add increased quantification to the vexillological landscape through the implementation of stars as like a proof of concept. I also wanted to confirm some trends or patterns that we think we know in vexillology, but are absent any corroborated data. I also want to introduce a process that I used and devised to make quantitative analysis of flags a little more automated and to get more precise data where it made sense for quantification of trends. Generally speaking, I will acknowledge this is a roughly statistics paper, so it doesn't address a lot of the why questions. So I know that's probably going to be the why is it like that? Your guess is as good as mine. I think that's a great avenue for future research. That's a catch-all. I learned that in grad school. There's a lot of data, a lot of graphs, a lot of charts throughout this entire presentation. I encourage you to look broader at the trends that I'm presenting and get less lost in the specifics of the data. So it's not so much important that you recognize that it's 8.607% and more so it's like roughly a quarter or something like that. So look at general trends versus specifics. So I will talk very briefly about the history of stars as monikers and trends in vexillology. So obviously, stars occurred as symbols as far back as the 12th century or even further in the Mesopotamian, Syrian, Babylonian times. They were thought to be markers as territorial boundaries first, or as the presentation of gods or goddesses, or on coins or in ceramics. And they became used in European heraldry by royal and noble families. And then I won't touch on the rest of them just for sake of time, but we all know the Star and the Crescent, the Southern Cross, the Star of David, as well as the Red Star and Communist Star. I will note that the symbology of stars on flags through my research varies widely, both on their visual impact and also on their symbolic commonalities, and I'll touch on those. Obviously, we know the very prominent examples in the flags of Australia and Ethiopia, and then we also have the nuanced examples, like in the flag of the star on the heel, the flag of the Isle of Man, and the small stars on the coat of arms of the Cayman Islands. So some more definitions. First off, I use the word national flags a lot throughout this talk in the paper, and that to me means fully independent or sovereign nations, autonomous regions, partially recognized states or overseas territories and collectivities. I'm talking about current flags. This study does not touch on historical flags in any way. I also categorize them by geographical regions. This was mostly to aid and facilitate me to identify trends that I could find in star data, as well as to help present that information more concisely. In geographical terms, I use these classifications on those colors throughout. So red for North America and the Caribbean, which includes Central America, blue for Oceania, purple South America, orange for Africa, yellow for Europe, green for Asia, which includes the Middle East, and I already talked about blue for Oceania. Lastly, the last methodology, I used one flag for each entity or country, and I used a classification hierarchy. So I used national flags first. Those are those that were officially adopted or in near unanimous use. Where a country may not have a national flag, I would then step down to the state flag, and where a state flag didn't exist, I would step down to the civil flag. That was most problematic for me in Central America because a lot of the Central American countries, the national flag doesn't have a coat of arms on it, but the state flag does. So in those cases, I would defer to the national flag because that's the one that's used by the government. Lastly, suns and moons. I understand this is a study of stars. I completely get as a geologist that the sun is a star. I get that. Symbologically speaking, it's very different. So for the sake of this analysis, the sun was not included in this analysis. So you can see examples of the sun on flags on the bottom corner there. I do have that data collected, and I think it warrants more research, but for the sake of stars, I'm talking about not the sun. So fun with numbers. Everyone loves numbers, right? We all know stars are ubiquitous symbols across the vexillological landscape, right? But how common are they actually? And so I analyzed 265 national flags and found that 95 flags contained at least one star, for a total of 370 stars on all national flags around the world. That's about a third of all flags have at least one star, with the average number of stars per flag globally at 4. The pie chart here shows the bar chart, excuse me, shows regional trends of stars. You can see that they're most common in frequency on the flags of Oceania, South America, and Africa, with around 50% of all flags in those regions containing stars, with the lowest being Europe, with only 15% of flags of Europe containing stars. The pie chart in the upper corner shows the distribution of stars regionally. So you can see whereas Oceania and South America have the most stars, are more common on flags, the distribution of stars actually favors North America. So that's not surprising given that the United States has 50 stars. So a quarter of all stars around the world occur in the flags of North America. USA. The baseline for some of my analysis here. I also looked at colors of stars on flags. So I categorized them into 6 main hues of primary colors or primary or secondary colors. As you can see, maybe surprisingly or unsurprisingly, 56% of all stars around the world are white. The second most common color is yellow. Combined, that represents 85% of all stars on flags are either white or yellow. The stacked bar chart on the right here shows that data in a geographical context. So you can kind of see that 2/3 of all stars on North America, Oceania, and South America are white versus the trends in Africa, Asia, and Europe. So essentially that's saying that white stars dominate in North America, Oceania, and South America, whereas yellow stars tend to dominate in Africa, Asia, and Europe. Interestingly, black stars only occur on the flags of Africa, representing 9% of stars in that region and only 1% of all stars globally. Possibly because in Western culture, black is deemed as like the color of death or weakness, whereas in non-Western cultures, black is a symbol of power or wealth. And so they occur more commonly in Africa. Some examples would be the stars in the flags on the bottom of the screen there. They're called the Black Star of Africa. And they all are the same black star. And they all symbolize Pan-Africanism and anti-colonialism. Also looked at points on stars. So obviously we heard a lot about number of points on a star in reference to the new flag of Minnesota. I examined all 370 stars on the 95 flags and found that 88% of all stars are 5-pointed stars, with only 12% representing the rest. Most importantly, only 2% of all stars are not 5, 6, or 7-pointed stars. The most common and the star with the most points is the flag of Marshall Islands. It's a 24-pointed star that represents the electoral districts. You also have the 4-pointed star on the flag of Aruba, which was partially designed by Whitney Smith, that represents the cardinal directions. And then sharing the 8-pointed star with the new flag of Minnesota, there's only 2 national flags that have 8-pointed stars on them, and that's the flag of Azerbaijan and Moldova. So you can kind of see how those trends exist in the points of stars as well. So into that new process I mentioned earlier, I devised an imaging processing algorithm to help further automate and quantify vexillological data. The algorithm uses a polygon masking technique to calculate total surface area of stars on flags in a pixel by pixel analysis of flags. So to create this algorithm and all the inputs, I took a flag image. Here's Bosnia and Herzegovina as an example. And I extracted the red, blue, green hues for each color, the stars and the surrounding areas, using a photo editing software. I then drew a polygon mask or a shape over the stars. Note the purple color here. I picked that purple hue because it doesn't exist anywhere else on any of my other flags. So I was trying to train my algorithm and make sure it didn't pull a shade of purple out that was somewhere else in a flag. I then would feed the original and annotated flag image along with the color data into the algorithm. The coding technique would then automatically scan the pictures and extract the pixels that match the specific color of the star, and then place that into a new binary grid. The output is denoted in the third picture out here. It would create, the code would automatically generate that figure for me, minus my annotations, of course, and place that into a binary grid where each box represents 1% of the flag surface area. I ran this analysis on all 95 of my flags. The data for that algorithm is denoted here. I acknowledge there's a lot going on that slide, so take a moment to breathe. And I left the text off on purpose just because I knew this slide was a little bit overwhelming. Again, I ran this on all 370 stars and 95 flags. The surface area of stars on flags range from 0.002% to 10.032%. I will note that I was surprised at how low the numbers were. Specifically, the flag of Myanmar and Vietnam, those stars are so striking. And I think it goes to the important note of design in flags, because you look at that and you think star is probably the symbol you think most commonly, and it takes up the largest portion of the flag. And Myanmar is the largest star, and it's only 10% of the surface area of the flag. So I thought that was kind of interesting right off the bat. The median of this whole data set is the flag of Cameroon. We have the flag of Cameroon over there. You can kind of see the median percent of stars on flags is 1.276%. So that's 50% of all flags have star surface areas greater than that. 50% have them less than that. I will note the flag of the United States, again, has the most stars, but is the 21st highest for surface area at only 2.467%. I will also know that the 5 smallest on the far right over there, the little bars down there, I enlarged them for you. They combined, the bottom 5 represent only 0.12% of surface area of the flag combined. That's 20 times smaller than the United States and 85 times smaller than Myanmar. Some of those examples would be the 2 6-pointed stars on the shield of the flag of Croatia, the 10 stars representing the departments for the country of Bolivia, and then the teeny tiny little 5 6-pointed stars. If you squint, you can see them on the sail of the ship in the coat of arms on the flag of the Falkland Islands. This goes to my algorithm. I think my algorithm did a really great job of pinpointing that those were stars and pulling them out and giving me a result of 0.002%. And so I'm really proud of the results of that. The histogram here on the upper center of this shows these numbers in a geographical context. The national flags of Oceania and North America have the highest median. And again, we talked earlier about the flags of South America being one of the highest chance of frequency of stars on the flags, yet their flags represent the smallest percent of surface area. So again, most likely to contain stars, but also have the smallest surface area of stars, with the lowest surface area of 0.0633%. Again, I'll point you to the flag of Brazil. They have 27 stars, the second highest star count of any flag, but it's the 9th lowest out of 95 from a surface area perspective. Switching gears a little bit, I tried to add some quantification to something that's highly qualitative. That's the symbology of stars on flags. Admittedly, this is inherently nuanced. It's admittedly subjective, presents complex and sometimes competing historical, idiomatic, and often localized connotations. But I tried my absolute best to divide these into 6 main categories. I won't read them all, but here are the classifications. The one being principles, concepts, and ideals. Those are more abstract ideologies such as hope, progress, and independence. Administrative divisions, land, and natural elements. Those are stars for states, provinces, constellations, or land more broadly. You have stars that are related to political. That would be political relationships or a political movement such as communism, or ties to a centralized federal government. Religion and faith, that one's pretty self-explanatory. That would be for faith or faith-based systems. Flags or stars representing history. That would be historical events or past famous people. And then lastly, for people and culture, that would be a connection to ethnic or socioeconomic groups, or often languages. You can see on the pie chart on the left side of the slide here how those all broke up of all national flags. I will note that there were 169 total star symbology classifications that I made because some stars had more than one meaning. So I didn't try to limit it to one meaning per star because that would be even impossible, and I thought would add too much bias to which meaning is more important. So you can see that nearly a third of all stars on flags have some tie to administrative divisions, land, geography, and celestial bodies. I placed this data into a geographical context as well. You can kind of see in this stacked bar chart how that symbology works. So I won't go over all the examples or trends that I noticed in this data, but I'll point out a couple. Purple, representing history. You can see that 50% of the stars of Europe, there are many, but 50% of them around roughly represent historical events. They're fairly low as a percentage of symbologies on stars on flags elsewhere, and they're completely absent in the stars in the flags of Africa and Oceania. The stars in Europe always tied to the royal and noble dynasties, like the 8-pointed star of Moldova that I mentioned earlier, or the flags of the stars on Slovenia. Another really big trend would be administrative divisions and land, the green on the slide here. You can see that they occur most commonly in the flags of Oceania. Almost 3/4 of all the stars on the flags of that region are tied to that category. And in North America and South America, those are the second highest with around 40% each. I thought that was quite interesting. Obviously in North America, the stars on the flags represent states like the United States, or the islands in the Caribbean are all usually, the stars represent those islands or parishes, versus in Oceania, the stars actually represent stars. Specifically the Southern Constellation or the Southern Cross. Those are evident on the flags of Australia, New Zealand, Samoa, Papua New Guinea, just to name a few. Keeping this figure in mind as I switch to the next example. So here are a couple more: religion and faith. So faith-based stars appear on at most 19 countries. You can see in the map that ones highlighted in red are the stars that symbolize religion. You can see that they occur almost exclusively in North Africa and the Middle East, with a few exceptions in Southeast Asia. You can also note that there are no stars based on religion in North America, South America, or Oceania. That's not to say that those regions aren't overtly religious. It's just that those stars symbolize different things. And obviously, most of these stars represent Islam or the Muslim faith, the big exception being the star on the flag of Israel obviously represents Judaism. There's been a lot of discussion with 8-pointed stars, again, with Minnesota, and how the star is some sort of conspiracy to represent Islam, or Somalia. First off, Somalia's star doesn't represent religion. It represents the people and the ethnic groups of Somalia. But also there are only 4 flags with stars that are related to religion that aren't 5-pointed. That would be the flag of Malaysia. It's a 14-pointed star. It represents the states. The 7-pointed star, the flag of Jordan, represents the verses in the Quran, or the 7 hills of Oman that the city was built on. And the flag of Azerbaijan has an 8-pointed star that's similar to Azerbaijan, or the flag of Azerbaijan has 8 points similar to Minnesota. And that's actually the 8 letters of the spelling of Azerbaijan in Arabic. So it has nothing to do with Islam at all. So it just shows kind of how things can get away from people. And then on the right side are the principles, concepts, and ideals of the flags of Africa. Half the stars of Africa represent these nebulous concepts of hope and faith and peace. It could be related to that region's long and brutal history of colonialism and their push for independence, which occurred in the 1950s and 1980s, resulting in new flags like the flag of the Central African Republic from 1958 or Zimbabwe from 1980, which represent future aspirations, strength, and hope. The symbology and iconography of stars on flags of Africa specifically could also appear to have a lot to do with civil war and political unrest in the subsequent independence, like the flags of South Sudan, adopted in 2005, which represents unity and hope post-independence, and Djibouti, which the star represents unity and independence itself. Again, a lot more is needed to review the why questions here. I think this is a great topic. I'm really excited. I've started digging in where I can figure out the why the stars of Africa are more likely than anywhere else to have these nebulous concepts, versus why don't they just have it based on the number of states like every other place does, right? So just some concluding remarks here. I'll restate my primary objectives were to increase quantification in vexillology. I wanted to showcase my image processing algorithm, and I think it has a lot of use for other principles, not just stars. I picked stars because they're ubiquitous symbols. And I wanted to help recognize geographical patterns on flags. So while these trends certainly exist in certain topics like symbology or color, the relationship between stars in flags were tenuous in other places. I have already started collecting data, and I have a giant master spreadsheet. I looked at 1,200 regional flags in addition to the 265 national flags. I only had 20 minutes and I'm rushing through this, so I couldn't imagine trying to talk about regional flags on top of this in 20 minutes. So see you in Seattle. I have collected data on plants, animals, vegetation, writing, weapons, suns, and moons, and I have those statistics calculated. I haven't processed them, but I'm excited to share them as I kind of work through all that data. And then just a final thought, I did throw this out. This is my algorithm that I put together. I created this image for the state flags of the United States. So 29 of the 51, I count DC. 51 state or district flags contain stars in the United States, and you can see their ranking based on star surface area. I highlighted Minnesota because here we are. The old flag of Minnesota had a whopping 0.223% surface area covered in stars, and the new redesign moved Minnesota to the third largest star in the United States on a state flag, representing 3.266% of the surface area. So that's all I have, and I'm available for questions. The question was how long it took me to devise the program. Once I actually realized how I wanted to quantify data, it didn't take very long to write the code. And what took me the longest time was processing the images. So all that image processing had to be done manually. I would love to figure out a way to automate pulling color hues out. The issue is creating the polygon. You have to draw the polygon over just the stars. And some flags, like Somalia, for example, it's easy. You can just cover the whole flag with a polygon because there's only one star, but you have to be careful where there might be. So the algorithm needs to know what color the star is and what color is immediately surrounding the star. So when it goes pixel by pixel, it's pulling that hue out. So if you have that color elsewhere, so if the star is white and you have other white in the flag anywhere else, it will think that that white, like in the Union Jack, is a star. So you have to only include the stars when you're drawing your polygon mask. So you have to sometimes hand draw the polygon or a series of small polygons to make sure that you're only including the star. Does that make sense?
Oh. Yep, way above my.
I used Adobe Acrobat, and I sometimes use Paint to try to get the hues, and then I exported all the images as TIFFs and then uploaded. As long as the algorithm is smart enough to know, as long as you were consistent with your file naming, so like flag of _ Zimbabwe, as long as it was the same in both, it was able to pull both images together, find the mask, only count what's under the mask of the color of the star. So the question was what sources I was using when I was assigning symbologies to stars. So obviously I used Wikicommons as a starting point, but I tried to find the original source to see if I could go backwards. I went through grad school, and if my advisor ever knew I used Wikipedia as a source, Wikipedia is not a source. I recognize that. I tried to find the original sources. It was often really challenging because it was in foreign languages, or the links were dead links and they weren't usable anymore. So I tried my hardest. I think that's kind of where I would love to start digging a little deeper in the library systems to find more information about that.
Can I tell you a little story about the Black Star?
Sure.
So the Black Star comes from Marcus Garvey, who was an early Pan-Africanist. And his organization, the United Negro Improvement Association, created a shipping line called the Black Star Line, which is a parody of the White Star Line. And Kwame Nkrumah encountered it when he was studying in the United States. So that's where the Black Star for Ghana came from. And I believe the others were emulating Ghana because Ghana was one of the first British colonies to achieve it.
That's a really great point too. And one thing that I have been thinking a lot about since I've written the paper, and maybe places I would love to see some more edits on my part, are it's hard. Is that the Black Star of Africa, or is that a tie to Ghana? You know, so there are some of those, like, it is the Black Star of Africa, but does it have an alternative meaning that's some political tie or a historical tie to another country like Guinea versus Guinea-Bissau? Are there ties in that way, and counting those symbologies separately so that you aren't necessarily over or undersampling? Yeah, the symbology of stars on flags is most definitely the more nuanced and qualitative. Again, I'm trying to ascribe, where it's possible, quantitative numbers to something that is hard to quantify. I really enjoyed your talk actually this morning, and it gave me a lot of ideas, because I think there's a tie between the impact and visual impact and quantification. Your point is well understood. I think contrast also has a lot to do with it. The flag of Somalia is very striking. It's white on a blue field. I think the flag of Vietnam is very striking, yellow on a red field, where maybe white on blue is less. I'm speculating. Maybe white on blue is less. Maybe the yellow on the red field of Cameroon is less visually striking, particularly because yellow also exists in the tricolor, right? So I completely understand that. The classifications, yeah. So you're right. There's also a lot of argument about, is the flag on the Star of Turkey actually related to Islam? They say it's not. I think that has more to do with the fact that they want to be more welcomed into Europe. And so they said that their star that's not the Star and Crescent. That's just, that's for the Ottoman Empire of the 13th century. That's a historical symbol, not a religious symbol. I would argue that's probably not true, but they were trying to become part of the EU. And so they changed that. The same thing with the flag of Northern Cyprus. The flag of Northern Cyprus is essentially the flag of Turkey in reverse. They say it's not. It's our relation to Turkey. But if Turkey's saying that that star is not Islam related, then is the flag of Northern Cyprus also not related to Islam? So there's a lot of ambiguity there. I completely acknowledge that. I was just trying to ascribe some percentages. I love trends, and I love to try to forecast or to look at where you see patterns, acknowledging that vexillology is inherently qualitative.